Why hasn't Kathleen Sebelius been fired? There's a million reasons to fire Kathleen Sebelius, and he's never addressed it. He's never talked about it. And it has to do with the filibuster. Explain.
Well, it's sort of related to that. It actually would be easier for him to fire her now, but it would still be very difficult, very costly for him. She is certainly responsible for the botched rollout of Obamacare. She also, the Government Accountability Office basically said she violated federal laws against campaigning while traveling on the taxpayer's dime. I think that was back in 2012.
Yep.
But he hasn't fired her. And so people have raised the question why, and some have said it's because they have a very close relationship. I think a much more likely reason is that it has to do with the Independent Payment Advisory Board, or Obamacare's death panel, as some people call it. And the way this board works is it has the power to do all sorts of things that really the Constitution leaves to Congress, like enact or impose taxes, or decide how much money Medicare is going to spend, or how it's going to spend that money, and also appropriate funds to the Department of Health and Human Services that Kathleen Sebelius oversees. Well, this is supposed to be a 15-member board, but if no one is seated on that board, if the President and the Senate cannot agree on whom the President will appoint, so if the President doesn't appoint anyone or the Senate doesn't confirm anyone, then all of IPAB's powers, all those legislative powers, fall to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius. So President Obama, if he fired Kathleen Sebelius for breaking the law, for an incompetent rollout of Obamacare, he would then have to nominate a new Secretary of Health and Human Services who would have to be confirmed by the Senate. Now, it would be easier because he could get that appointee through with just 51 votes. But it would be, the confirmation hearings would be a bloodbath, because it would be even worse than what we were probably going to get if there had been any hearings on Don Berwick, who's appointed to run the Medicare program, because this would be the first Health and Human Services secretary who would wield all those lawmaking powers that IPAB gives that office. So the president, it's much easier for him if he just lets her stay in place, and then all those powers fall to her. She never had to go through that rigorous a selection process, because there was no IPAB when she was nominated. And
it also brings up all of the things that they have denied that this health care law can do. They've denied this panel in all intents and purposes and said it didn't exist. And you're sitting there and you're trying to now get them through a very tough process. What's going to happen? I mean, you're going to bring up all of those questions. You're going to talk about all those things. And then it gets much, much worse for the President of the United States. Much worse.
Well, Kathleen Sebelius, as it turns out, will only be able to wield those powers for 1 year, because it's a long, complicated part of Obamacare, but the Medicare actuary did not make a determination this year that he would have needed to make in order for Kathleen Sebelius to start writing laws that would take effect in 2015. But if they make that determination next year, then she'll be able to start writing laws that take effect in 2016, the last year of President Obama's second term. But if President Obama and Senate Democrats want to, they could pack this board with 15 members who would be able to serve at least until 2020. So through the first term of the next president, and that next president wouldn't be able to remove any of these people. It's basically impossible for them to remove any of these board members, so that board, packed with Democratic appointees, would then be able to run the Medicare program and essentially the whole healthcare sector without much or any oversight by Congress.
Because this is insane. This is absolutely...
It is insane. It gets a little more insane, because for Congress to reject an IPAB proposal, they call them proposals, but they're really laws that IPAB is writing, you need 60 votes in the Senate to block an IPAB proposal. So it takes 60 votes to block it. So any 41 members of the Senate can make sure that IPAB proposal becomes law, and it only takes that takes 51 votes to block someone from being seated on the IPAB panel. And remember, Senate Democrats have 55 votes right now.
Unbelievable.
So they could pack the board with 15 members between now and the end of 2014.
That's really what everybody needs to be paying attention on the nuclear option, is what's coming next. As with always with this administration, don't worry about what they're doing right now. Look to the future. What is coming your way? Thank you so much. Back in just a second.